Hello beloveds, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share a little part of my heart's journey with all of you and a little part of my heart. Funny story, I just filmed this whole video, edited it, and then right before I was going to put it up on YouTube, it collapsed. I don't know what happened, it just didn't work. So here I am, this is my commitment to you to create this video. So my heart's journey began shortly after I was born because when we're born, our energy, our life force is all within the navel area. And once we experience love, once we experience joy and emotion, then our awareness comes to our heart. And eventually, once the ego is developed, then our awareness comes to our minds. And for many of us, it stays up here for most of our lives. When we are able to heal our hearts, and let's face it, pretty much anyone watching this right now needs to heal their heart or will have to at some point in their lives. It's human nature. I have yet to meet anyone who has not experienced a heartbreak or a heartache or some kind of trauma within their lives. So by healing our hearts and bringing our awareness back to our hearts, we are then approaching life from the heart space. And when we approach life from the heart space, we experience more joy and bliss, and with our hearts open, we can love fully and unconditionally. So my first romantic love, this is when the heart is most noticeable because it's most open, happened when I was 14. And young love, or our very first love, is usually the most, I think, beautiful, because it's when our hearts haven't been broken yet. We haven't gone through the trauma in romantic relationship. We haven't experienced betrayal or lies. We haven't become jaded, and we are just loving straight from the heart. And this is when people make jokes about young love, but really it is just a playful, a fun, and really the love that we should always have when it's that open. And of course, boundaries are good to learn over time. But a lot of us over time create walls around our hearts, and I was definitely no exception. I created walls upon walls upon walls around my heart, and I did this subconsciously or unconsciously. I was not aware of it. Through my teen years, my very first love betrayed me pretty deeply, and I didn't have the tools to deal with this properly at the time. I was very young, and I know 14 sounds like a very young age to begin dating. I lived with my boyfriend at that time. My circumstances in life did lead me to grow up and to mature quite quickly in comparison to other girls that were my age. After that partner, I had my high school sweetheart who actually died. And this isn't like a negative thing. I don't want to be... Humans are so funny about death. Like as soon as I say, oh, I've had 2 partners die before I was 20 and another one die when I was 26. And it doesn't have to be this sad thing. I'm just giving this like disclosure right now. It doesn't have to be like, oh no, I'm so sorry, or like I'm saying something negative. This is our lives, and we can all go at any moment. So it was very difficult for my heart to go through that, of course. And then because I didn't heal from that, I went into 2 back-to-back, very abusive, physically, mentally, emotionally, every level, abusive and toxic relationships. So that's where the real trauma came in my life. This landed me in women's shelters and homeless. I slept on the streets for a bit, actually, just to avoid my home, and I had nowhere else to go at the time. So I went through all of this, and then I decided that I wanted a new life for myself, so I borrowed the money to go to China on a one-way ticket. And I started a whole new life without ever healing or thinking about any of that stuff. And I began my spiritual journey, and I basically spiritually bypassed all of the emotions. And I thought, oh no, I got it all figured out. I'm over in Thailand, or I'm over in Nepal, and I'm living in an ashram, and I'm waking up and meditating 4 hours a day. Like, I got this whole life thing, this whole spiritual thing figured out. And I was completely bypassing the trauma that my heart had gone through. And then for about 4 years, I stayed completely to myself. So I worked in nightclubs. I had like this party kind of job, but most of my life was spent alone in ashrams. I would spend a few months in silence. I would spend like a month in the mountains. I would spend a lot of time alone. And I just thought that this is what I preferred, but it was actually a way of staying away from being hurt again, and a way to stay away from opening up to humans. And then I discovered festivals, and that was my time where I'd socialize. And once I started going to festivals in numerous countries, especially Australia, I started meeting healers, and I became friends with a lot of healers, and they wanted to do energy work on me. And coming from my scientific background, I studied biology in university, and I always was on a spiritual path, but I was very hesitant to believe any of this energy stuff until I could see it. I always have to see something to believe it. So I started letting my friends do some energy work on me, and all of them began saying the same thing, that wow, I had no energy in my heart chakra, in my heart space. Usually when you have a blocked heart chakra, you can feel the energy there, but it's like shaking. You can feel the blockage, but there's energy. I had nothing. So one of my friends actually said that I felt like a vampire, like I had no life inside of me. So of course, I didn't believe this right away, but then after I heard it from a few people, I started visiting other healers at different festivals, and eventually all of them said the same thing. So I must have heard it from 12 different people, that there was just no energy running through my heart. I had to start seriously being honest with myself and taking a serious look at my life. I had gone through quite a bit, but my way of dealing with that was everyone goes through shit, I was like, everyone goes through shit. People have gone through a lot worse than me. Who am I to sit around and let it ruin my life? Like, who am I to cry about this every day? This happened. Yeah, it sucks, but I'm just gonna go enjoy my life. And that was my healing. That was really my heart's way of just closing up, putting it deep down somewhere inside, and pretending everything was okay, which we can't do, because later on in life, at some point, it will project into our lives in one way or another as disease, projection into relationships, projection into the workplace, wherever it may be. So these things need to be dealt with. And I also realized that I didn't want to be alone. Like, a lot of my life still is spent alone. I do enjoy my own company, but I was really craving intimacy. And when I say intimacy, it wasn't sexual intimacy that my soul was craving, but it was vulnerability and witnessing vulnerability and looking into someone's eyes, even into a stranger's eyes, and then holding them. I went through years without being touched. So even to hug my male friends, my whole body would tense up and I just wasn't comfortable. So of course there was trauma, and it took people pointing it out finally when I tried to open up and I met partners, like potential partners. They could feel this trauma inside of me, and then they would bring it up. So this is why relationships can be such amazing teachers for us, because people will be reflections of us, and they'll hopefully be honest and reflect back on us what we can't see ourselves. I had this brought to my attention that I couldn't cuddle, I couldn't hold hands, I couldn't sleep in the same bed as someone that I really cared about. I couldn't look them in the eyes. There was so many blockages and all of this coming together, I finally realized that I did have trauma within my body that I couldn't continue ignoring. So this is when my real heart's healing journey began, and I was traveling and I was going to different gatherings, going to different women's ceremonies, going to different shamans. My first breakthrough was through psychedelics, definitely. Through LSD, I met someone who did psychedelic therapy. And that was my first time. I never knew about this before. I was always very scared of taking drugs, but the way that we're approaching this is not as a drug, it's as therapy. And we're doing it more consciously with a very strong intent. So I started using it on my own, and that's when I could look at all the circumstances in my life that had happened with zero ego, because what LSD does is it dissolves the ego. Then I could replay all of these things that were inside of me that I couldn't replay without the tool. So without that tool, it hurt me too much. But then I could actually sit and meditate on this person hurting me, this person dying, and this person doing this to me, these terrible, dark things that I couldn't normally deal with. I had to put them away quickly because it was just too much for my heart to register. But using this tool, I was able to bring it up, and then I could see it in a different perspective, like from a higher perspective, why this happened to me and why this person did this to me. I could see it from their perspective, and I could ultimately heal from it. So psychedelics was the first thing, and I don't recommend it to everyone. I was in a space where I was meditating every day for a couple years before I did it. So I knew what to expect on a certain level. If I had tried it when I was, say, 20, it wouldn't have gone the same way. So the next big thing was going to different healers everywhere. I continued doing that, and one day I was in Byron Bay, Australia, and this man came up to me, and he said that he had a message from Source, I believe was his words, and that his wife has to do healing on my heart. And she used to be an energy healer, but apparently she hadn't for about 5 years. But he heard this call so loudly that she had to do it. And he said he was going to call her and tell her. She ended up coming to my hotel that night, and what was supposed to be a 1-hour session turned into a 4.5-hour session. And we went through many different practices. She was able to break down trauma that had happened to me as a child going up all the way to that point, a lot of things that I had blocked out, and energy work, speaking as things came out. Eventually she had a singing bowl like this over my heart, and she was hitting it, the vibration. And at this point, the state that I was in was almost in a psychedelic state. So I wasn't fully conscious. And the image that I just got as I'm explaining this is, because I'm trying to think of how I can explain this experience, it was the feeling of, if say you had a coconut around your heart space, coconuts are really hard. And if you were hitting it with a hammer, imagine like the coconut's eventually going to blast open. That's what happened to my heart. So the vibration somehow broke it open. And as it broke open, all of the emotions that were held within came through, and I felt like an electric shock through my body. And she held me, and I cried probably for over an hour, sobbing and having all these emotions coming through. And as these emotions were coming through, I could see every different scenario in my mind playing out like a TV show. And every scene, as it came up, would dissolve away. And then another scene, and it would dissolve away. And I knew as this was happening, it was my heart letting it go, and it was healing that. It was letting it come through and letting the emotions, because they're emotions, energy in motion, They needed to come through, and they were finally in a safe space where I was being held, where my heart felt safe to completely let it all go, because I never had anyone sit me down and ask me how I was doing really through any of the situations that I was in. So I never felt in a safe space to express, and that's what everyone needs. That's what you need to heal your heart. So going forward with this, I discovered Tantra, and I started going to tantric workshops and tantric courses. And as many of you know, if you're following my work, for the first few years or a couple years, it had nothing to do with sex, because I was really like focused on not making it all about sexual energy. Now I incorporate that a bit because sexual energy is very important in our lives. But I didn't want to confuse Tantra with sex like many Westerners do. So I began these classes, and this is what I needed. This was the intimacy that I missed. It was me sitting with a stranger, staring into their eyes for half an hour, being vulnerable, saying all of the things that I've always wanted to say to someone I've never met before. And this is me sitting in front of you, another human, another manifestation of the divine consciousness that you are, that I am, respecting, holding space for one another, and feeling that connection and knowing deep within our souls that you are simply another manifestation of me. So we are all just experiencing a different reality, a different perspective of what could be the same reality, but never really will be the same. Knowing that we're strong enough to do this. We're strong enough to show up, to be here in front of each other. We have the courage to break our hearts open, to do the work. And that for me was completely life-changing. So I am holding my very first Tantra retreat in Australia. I think it's fitting that I hold it where my heart was bursted open. And this is my first Tantra retreat. I am so passionate about it. I'm so excited. And I will be having more in the future if you're interested, if you feel called to it, and if you can't make it to Australia. At the time of this video, I think I have almost half of the spots filled. So if you're interested, I will put the link below. And if you have any questions about it, just comment below and I will do my best to get back to all of them. I really wanted to share a little bit of my journey with you so you could understand why I have ended up in the space to hold these events, to hold these retreats, and to hold these workshops, because these practices are so dear to me on my journey and they've transformed my life. So in the link, if you follow it, you can see some of the itinerary and some of the practices that will be involved. It's called Awakening Your Heart Retreat. So it's basically everything that worked the best for me during my journey through Tantra as a healing modality. And it is held on some of my favorite lands, sacred lands of the Krishna village in New South Wales. If you're a traveler, if you live in Australia, I highly recommend visiting the Krishna village. If you want to experience a beautiful farming community of bhakti yogis who are just living out in full devotion and love and service. I've really pushed a lot of my friends to go there. I absolutely love it, and I'm so excited that my first Tantra retreat and my first retreat in one of my favorite places in the world, Australia, will be there. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I really wish you all the love and all the support on your heart's journey. I know it can be scary. I know it can be messy. I know it can be fucking ugly. Really, I've gone through it. I've gone through the depths and the darkness and a lot of it. Of course, it is a lifetime journey. I'm by no means healed now. It will always be a journey of mine, but I know it can be difficult. But I'm here living through it, telling you that it's worth it. It's worth it to show up, and it's worth it to take the risk, if you want to call it that, for love. And our hearts can love so unconditionally and so infinitely It is our superpower. Seriously, our human superpower is the resilience and the strength and the love that our hearts are able to give. So I wish you many blessings on your journey. Thank you for watching.